My father was so obsessed with being the perfect dad to my stepsisters that he abandoned me. At a I'm Sophia, 28 years old now, but the scars still feel fresh sometimes. When I was 12, my dad remarried and suddenly acquired two teenage stepdaughters. That's when everything changed. He became obsessed with being their perfect father, and somewhere along the way forgot I existed. The day he abandoned me at school was when I finally understood my place in his new life. I stopped waiting to be chosen. Where are you watching from today? Subscribe to hear how I learned to choose myself instead. My childhood before the divorce was filled with moments that made me feel like the center of my dad's world. Every Saturday morning, Thomas, my father, would wake me up with the smell of his famous blueberry pancakes wafting through our small house. "Rise and shine, Sophia Bear," he'd call out, using the nickname that made me feel special loved. We had traditions that were just ours. The way he taught me to ride a bike running alongside me down our street until I finally found my balance. "I'm doing it, Daddy, I'm doing it!" I screamed with delight as he cheered me on. Each night he'd read me stories doing all the character voices that made me giggle until my sides hurt. When I was 10, the arguments between my parents became impossible to ignore. They tried to shield me, but the tension filled our home like a physical presence. I remember hiding in my closet, hugging my teddy bear, as their voices rose and fell downstairs. The day they sat me down to explain they were getting divorced, I wasn't surprised, but that didn't make it hurt any less. "Nothing will change how much we both love you," my mom promised, squeezing my hand. "We'll always be a family, just a different kind," my dad added, his eyes red-rimmed from crying. The first year after the divorce followed a predictable routine. 1 week with mom, 1 week with dad. My father moved into an apartment not far from our old house. He transformed the second bedroom into Sophia's space, painting it my favorite shade of purple and putting up fairy lights around the ceiling. "So you always feel at home here," he explained as he showed me the room for the first time. Then when I was 11, everything shifted. My dad met Diane at a work conference. She was tall with perfect blonde hair and a laugh that seemed to fill any room she entered. The first time he introduced us, she bent down to my level and said, "Your father talks about you constantly. I've been dying to meet the famous Sophia." I liked her at first. She brought me small gifts when she came over, a chocolate bar or cute hair clips. She asked questions about school and actually seemed interested in my answers. But I noticed how my dad changed around her, laughing, more standing taller, trying harder. With Diane came her daughters Amanda and Jessica, 14 and 16. They were beautiful like their mother, with the same blonde hair and confident smiles. The first time we all had dinner together was awkward. They called my father Thomas and looked at me like I was a mildly interesting museum exhibit. "Girls, Sophia is in middle school too, Amanda. Maybe you could tell her about what to expect next year," Diane suggested. Amanda looked me up and down. "It's whatever, just don't be weird and you'll be fine." Jessica was texting under the table, barely acknowledging my existence. After they left that night, my dad was practically glowing. "What did you think? Aren't they great?" I shrugged, not wanting to disappoint him. "They seem nice. They're just getting used to everything. You'll be like sisters before you know it," he promised, ruffling my hair. That first Thanksgiving as a blended family was when I started to feel the ground shifting beneath my feet. We had always spent the holiday with my grandparents, but that year my dad announced we would be going to Diane's parents' house instead. "But what about Grandma and Grandpa?" I asked, my voice small. "We'll see them at Christmas, sweetheart. This is important to Diane, and we want the girls to feel comfortable with all these changes." At Diane's parents' lavish home, I sat quietly as Amanda and Jessica were showered with attention. My father seemed desperate to impress everyone, jumping up to help in the kitchen, laughing too loudly at Diane's father's jokes, constantly checking if the girls needed anything. "Thomas is such a natural father figure," I overheard Diane's mother say. "The girls already adore him." I watched my father beam at the compliment while I picked at my food, feeling invisible. That night, as he tucked me into bed in the unfamiliar guest room, I asked, "Dad, is everything going to change now?" He sat on the edge of my bed and took my hand. "Some things will change, Soph, but not the important stuff. Not how much I love you. You'll always be my girl." I wanted to believe him. But as I watched him rush out when Jessica called his name from down the hall, I felt the first real tremor of doubt. Something was already changing, and I wasn't sure I would like where it was heading. By the time I turned 13, my father's relationship with Diane had progressed rapidly. They got married in a ceremony where Amanda and Jessica were bridesmaids, and I was relegated to junior bridesmaid with a dress I hated. The photographer had to be reminded several times to include me in the family photos. Now just the new family, the photographer had said, and no one contradicted him as I stepped aside, watching my father pose with his arm around Diane, Amanda, and Jessica, flanking them perfectly. When they bought a new house together, a big colonial in an upscale neighborhood, I was told we would all be moving in after the school year ended. My mother tried to hide her concern when I told her. "Are you excited about the new house, honey?" she asked carefully. I shrugged. "I guess so. Dad says I'll like my new school." The truth was, I was terrified of leaving my friends, my school, everything familiar. But I didn't want to disappoint my father, who seemed so eager for this fresh start. Moving day arrived with excruciating clarity. When we pulled up to the new house, Amanda and Jessica were already fighting over bedrooms. "Girls, we've already discussed this," Diane said with exasperation. "Jessica gets the bedroom with the bay window since she's oldest, and Amanda gets the one with the built-in bookshelves." My father turned to me with an apologetic smile. "Sophia, we have a special place for you too." That special place turned out to be the converted room in the basement. It was smaller than either of my stepsisters' rooms, with a tiny window near the ceiling that let in minimal light. The walls were freshly painted blue, a color I had never expressed any preference for. "We figured you'd want your privacy," my dad explained, helping me carry my boxes downstairs. "The girls are used to being on the same floor, and this way you get your own bathroom too." The bathroom was an afterthought, a tiny shower stall and sink tucked into what had once been a storage closet. But I nodded and thanked him because the eager, hopeful look on his face made it impossible to say how I really felt. That summer established the new normal. My stepsister's activities dominated the family calendar. Jessica's volleyball tournaments and Amanda's dance competitions were attended by both my father and Diane, often requiring overnight trips. My art club exhibition, where my watercolor won an honorable mention, was attended by only my father, who arrived late and left early because "Amanda has a dress rehearsal tonight." "Your painting is beautiful, Soph," he said hurriedly, checking his watch. "I'm really proud of you. I've got to run, but we'll celebrate this weekend, okay?" The celebration never happened. By the weekend, Jessica had qualified for a regional volleyball tournament, and everyone was focused on that. When the school year started, the pattern continued. My father rarely asked about my classes or friends, but knew every detail of my stepsisters' social lives and academic achievements. Dinner conversations revolved around their days, their challenges, their triumphs. I learned to eat quickly and excuse myself to do homework in my basement bedroom. My 14th birthday fell on a Tuesday that year. My mother had celebrated with me the weekend before with a small party at our favorite pizza place with a few friends. On my actual birthday, I woke up hoping for some acknowledgement from my father and stepfamily. I got ready for school, putting on the new sweater my mom had given me, and went upstairs for breakfast. Diane was making lunch for the girls, and my father was reading something on his tablet. "Good morning," I said, trying to sound cheerful. "Morning, Sophia," Diane replied without looking up. My father grunted from behind his screen. I waited the silence, stretching awkwardly. Finally, I couldn't stand it anymore. "So, today's my birthday." My father's head snapped up, eyes wide. "Today, I thought that was next week." Diane looked embarrassed. "Thomas, it's on the family calendar. I reminded you yesterday." "I'm so sorry, Soph," he said, getting up to give me a quick hug. "Happy birthday, sweetheart. We'll do something special tonight, okay?" That something special turned out to be a hastily purchased cake from the grocery store and a gift card to a clothing store I never shopped at. Meanwhile, I couldn't help but remember Amanda's birthday the month before elaborate decorations, a surprise party with 20 friends, and a professional photographer to capture it all. The most painful contrast came at my middle school graduation. For weeks, I had reminded my father about the ceremony. "It's at 6 on Thursday, Dad. You don't need to come early or anything. Just be there before it starts." "Of course I'll be there, Sophia. I wouldn't miss it," he assured me. On graduation day, I sat with my classmates, scanning the audience for my father's face. My mother was there waving and taking pictures, but the seat we had saved for my dad remained empty as the ceremony began. Halfway through, as Ashley Martinez was receiving her certificate, I saw him slip into the auditorium looking harried. When it was finally over, he rushed over, giving me a quick hug. "I'm so sorry I was late, Soph. Amanda had her big dance recital today and it ran long. I tried to be here on time." I learned later that he had left Amanda's recital early to make it to my graduation at all. She had apparently been furious, refusing to speak to him for days afterward. The guilt he showed over disappointing her was far more evident than any remorse he felt for being late to my milestone. That night I overheard him on the phone with someone, probably a relative. "It was impossible to be in two places at once," he was saying. "I did my best, but you can't imagine how hard it is to balance everything with three daughters who all need me." I stood in the hallway, a strange feeling settling in my chest. He counted me among his daughters when it was convenient for his narrative, but his actions told a different story. I was learning where I truly ranked in his priorities, and it wasn't where a daughter should be. The incident that finally broke something inside me happened when I was 15. By then I had learned to expect less from my father, to make fewer requests, to need less of his time and attention. But there were still moments when I couldn't help but hope. My sophomore year, our English class was doing a special project called Family Narratives. Each student had to interview a parent and create a presentation about that parent's childhood and life journey. Mr. Collins, my English teacher, had emphasized that having the parent physically present for part of the presentation was essential. "This isn't just about what they tell you," he explained. "It's about the interaction, the relationship between generations." I immediately thought of my father. Despite everything, I was curious about his childhood, the stories he might share. And maybe, just maybe, this would be something that could bring us closer again. When I asked him, he seemed genuinely interested. "That sounds great, Sophia. When do we need to do the interview?" We scheduled a Saturday afternoon, but when the day came, he called to reschedule because Jessica had a college visit that couldn't be moved. The next planned interview was cut short when Amanda needed help with a car problem. Each time, he promised to make it up to me. "We'll get it done, Soph. Don't worry." The presentations were scheduled for a Thursday evening, a special event where parents would attend and refreshments would be served afterward. The date had been on the family calendar for weeks, circled in red. I had reminded my father repeatedly. "I'll be there," he promised the night before. 6 o'clock sharp. I believed him. Despite everything, I still believed him. I arrived at school early that day, nervously arranging my presentation materials. Other students' parents began filtering in, taking seats, engaging in proud conversation. My mother had an unavoidable work commitment in another city, so my father was my only option. At 5:45, I texted him, "Just checking that you're on your way." No response. At 5:55, "People are starting to arrive. Where are you?" Nothing. The presentations began at 6:10. I kept glancing at the door, making excuses to Mr. Collins. "He's just running late. Traffic must be bad." By 6:30, I had called him 3 times with no answer. Finally, as Lucy Chen's father was describing his immigration journey to America, my phone buzzed. The text read, "So sorry, Soph. Jessica got waitlisted at Northwestern and is having a breakdown. Need to deal with this. Can't make it. Get a ride home with someone." I stared at the screen, the words blurring as tears filled my eyes. Mr. Collins noticed my distress and quietly asked if everything was all right. I nodded mechanically, unable to speak. When my turn came, I got through the presentation, somehow showing the few family photos I had and recounting the limited information I'd managed to gather during our abbreviated interview sessions. Mr. Collins looked concerned, but didn't comment on my father's absence. After the presentations, the room buzzed with conversation as families mingled over cookies and punch. I stood alone, checking my phone repeatedly, though I knew no new messages would appear. "Do you need a ride home, Sophia?" Mr. Collins finally asked. I shook my head. "I'll be fine. Thank you." I hadn't actually arranged for a ride, but couldn't bear the humiliation of admitting it. Instead, I waited until most people had left, then began the long walk home. It had started raining, a cold, persistent November rain that soaked through my jacket within minutes. By the time I reached the house, I was drenched and shivering uncontrollably. The lights were on, and I could hear voices inside. Taking a deep breath, I opened the door. In the living room, my father sat with Jessica and Diane. Jessica's eyes were red from crying, but they were all laughing at something on my father's phone. No one looked up when I entered. "I'm home," I said, my voice sounding strange even to my own ears. My father glanced up. "Oh, hey, Soph. Sorry about tonight. Jessica got some tough news." "I know, I got your text." I stood there, water dripping onto the entryway tile. Diane finally noticed my condition. "Sophia, you're soaking wet. Did you walk home?" "Yes." "In this weather, why didn't you get a ride?" my father asked, looking confused. "With who?" I asked simply. A flash of guilt crossed his face. "You should have called." I did, 3 times. An uncomfortable silence fell. Jessica looked between us, then down at her hands. "Go get changed before you catch cold," Diane finally said. I did as I was told, trudging down to my basement bedroom, leaving wet footprints on the stairs. As I peeled off my damp clothes, I could hear their conversation resume above me, as if the uncomfortable moment had never happened. The next morning, I woke with a fever and sore throat. My father had already left for work when Diane knocked on my door. "Sophia, aren't you getting ready for school?" I croaked out that I wasn't feeling well. She felt my forehead and frowned. "You're burning up. That's what happens when you walk in the rain. I'll call the school." She brought me some toast and juice later, but otherwise left me alone. When my father came home that evening, he stopped by my room briefly. "Diane says you're sick. Too much rain, huh?" I nodded, not trusting myself to speak without crying. He shifted awkwardly in the doorway. "We'll get some rest. Let us know if you need anything." That night, through my fevered haze, I overheard a conversation upstairs. My room was directly beneath the kitchen, and voices often carried through the vents. "She made me feel terrible, like I abandoned her," my father was saying. "Thomas, she walked home in the rain." "She could have gotten seriously ill," Diane replied. What was I supposed to do? Jessica was having a meltdown. "You know how much she wanted Northwestern." "I know, but Sophia is your daughter, too. She had this school thing. It was just a class presentation. Jessica's future is at stake." "Still, maybe you could have—" "Sophia's being dramatic. She could have called an Uber or something." "She's 15, Thomas. She's resourceful. She would have figured something out." I turned my face into my pillow, something hardening inside me. It wasn't just that he had abandoned me at school. It was that he didn't even see it as abandonment. In his mind, I should have just figured something out, because my needs would always be secondary. I wasn't the priority. I never would be. That night, burning with fever and heartache, I made a decision that would alter the course of my relationship with my father forever. I would stop waiting to be chosen. I would stop expecting him to be the father I needed. From now on, I would choose myself. The next 2 years of high school were an exercise in gradual detachment. I stopped asking my father to attend my events. I stopped sharing my accomplishments or concerns. Our interactions became increasingly superficial. Brief exchanges about practical matters, nothing more. I threw myself into school and my part-time job at the local bookstore. I made new friends who knew nothing about my family situation, and therefore couldn't pity me. I found solace in art and literature, creating the connections on paper that I couldn't seem to maintain in real life. When my 17th birthday approached, I had no expectations. My mother planned a small celebration the weekend before, just as she always did. At my father's house, I assumed the day would pass unmarked, as it had the year before, when everyone was preoccupied with Amanda's college visits. To my surprise, my father actually remembered the date this time, sort of. "Happy birthday, Soph," he said over breakfast, sliding an envelope across the table. "Sorry I didn't have time to wrap anything." Inside was a gift card to a generic department store. $50, the same amount he'd given me for Christmas. "Thanks, Dad," I said, tucking it into my pocket. "I thought maybe we could grab dinner tonight." "Just the two of us," he added almost hesitantly. For a moment, hope flickered. "Really? That would be nice?" "Great. I'll pick you up after your shift at the bookstore. Around 7. I nodded, trying not to appear too eager. At 7:30, I was still waiting outside the bookstore, the evening growing chilly. When he finally pulled up at 7:45, he was full of apologies. "Work call ran long, then traffic was a nightmare. You ready?" I climbed into the car, noticing he was still in his work clothes. His tie loosened, but still knotted at his neck. "Where would you like to go?" he asked, pulling away from the curb. "I don't know. You pick." He ended up taking me to a fast food restaurant, the kind with plastic trays and bright fluorescent lighting. As we ate burgers and fries, he made awkward attempts at conversation. "So, how's school going?" "Fine. Still working at the bookstore, obviously." "Yeah, you like it there." "It's okay." Eventually, he sighed. "Sophia, I'm trying here. Could you meet me halfway?" I looked at him, then really looked at him. "Are you trying? Because this feels like an obligation to me." His face flushed. "That's not fair." "I remembered your birthday, didn't I? I'm taking you to dinner." "Fast food, Dad. At a place you know I don't even like nearly an hour late." "I had a busy day." "You're always busy. Just not with me." An uncomfortable silence fell. He pushed his food around on his tray. "I don't know what you want from me, Sophia." "Nothing," I said quietly. "I don't want anything from you anymore." The rest of the meal passed in strained silence. When he dropped me at my mother's house later, he tried again. "I'm sorry if tonight wasn't what you wanted. I'll make it up to you." I nodded, not believing him for a second. "Good night, Dad." 3 months later, Jessica turned 18. My father and Diane threw her an elaborate party at an expensive venue with professional decorations and catering. Jessica received a brand new car with a giant red bow on it sitting in the driveway. Photos of the event dominated our house for weeks afterward. 2 months after that, Amanda's 17th birthday was celebrated with a weekend trip to Chicago, shopping sprees, and tickets to a Broadway touring show. Her gift was less extravagant than Jessica's only a MacBook Pro and iPhone. I didn't begrudge my stepsisters these things, not really. They weren't to blame for my father's choices. But the contrast was impossible to ignore. The same man who couldn't manage a proper dinner for my birthday spent thousands on celebrations for his stepdaughters. The final breaking point came during my junior year, when conversations about college began in earnest. In my English class, we were working on personal essays for college applications. The teacher asked us to discuss our plans with our parents and bring their input to class. That evening at dinner, I gathered my courage. "Dad, can we talk about college? I need to start planning applications." He looked surprised, but nodded. "Sure. What are you thinking?" "I'd like to apply to State University. They have a good psychology program." "Psychology, huh? That's interesting. Why that field?" It was the first genuine interest he'd shown in my future in a long time. I explained my fascination with understanding how people's minds worked, especially children's. "I want to help kids dealing with family transitions." I said, not adding the obvious that my own experience had inspired this path. He nodded thoughtfully. "State's pretty expensive, though. Maybe you should consider community college first, then transfer. Save some money." I stared at him confused. "But Jessica is at Northwestern. That's way more expensive than State." A flash of discomfort crossed his face. "That's different. Jessica had her heart set on Northwestern since she was 12. It was her dream school." "This is my dream school," I countered. "Well, maybe you could get scholarships. Your grades are good, right?" "They're excellent. I have a 4.0. "That's great, Soph. That should help with costs." The conversation moved on, but something nagged at me. Later that week, I overheard my father and Diane discussing finances in their bedroom. Their voices carried through the heating vent into my basement room. "The tuition payment for Jessica is due next week," Diane was saying. "I've got it covered," my father replied. "I moved some money from the investment account. And Amanda will be starting next year. Have you thought about how we'll manage both?" "We'll figure it out. I can pick up some consulting work on weekends. Maybe refinance the house if we need to." "What about Sophia's college? She'll be starting the year after Amanda." There was a pause before my father spoke. "I've been thinking about that. She seems interested in State, which is more affordable. And she can get loans. Jessica and Amanda don't test well enough for academic scholarships, but Sophia might." "So you're saying—" "I'm saying we have limited resources, and we need to allocate them where they're most needed. Jessica and Amanda don't have another parent contributing. Sophia has her mother." "Have you discussed this with Karen?" "Not yet, but she'll understand. She knows the girls are my responsibility now, too." I sat on my bed, shock turning to a cold, hard certainty. In my father's mind, I had been relegated to an afterthought, a financial obligation that could be shifted elsewhere, because I had another parent to pick up his slack. The next weekend at my mother's house, I finally broke down. All the years of feeling secondary, of being forgotten and pushed aside, came pouring out between sobs. My mother held me, her own eyes filling with tears. "Oh, Sophia, why didn't you tell me it was this bad? I didn't want to make you sad, and I kept thinking it would get better, that Dad would remember I exist." She stroked my hair, her voice tight with controlled anger. "This isn't right, honey, and you don't have to accept it." Over the next few days, my mother and I had several long conversations about the future. She had been saving for my college since the divorce, but had assumed my father would contribute his share as well. Now we had to reconsider our options. "I'll take out loans," I insisted. "I don't want anything from him." "Sophia, he has a legal and moral obligation to help with your education." "I don't care about legal. I care about wanted. He doesn't want to help me, Mom. He's made that clear." The following week, I asked to speak with my father alone. We sat at the kitchen table, the house unusually quiet with Diane and the girls out shopping. "I need to tell you something." I began, my voice steadier than I expected. He looked wary. "Okay. I know you don't plan to help with my college expenses. I overheard you talking to Diane." His face flushed. "That was a private conversation, Sophia." "That happened to be about my future." He sighed heavily. "It's not that I don't want to help. It's just that with Jessica already in school and Amanda starting next year, finances are tight. So they come first. Again. It's not that simple." "It is that simple, Dad. It always has been. They come first. They always have, from the moment you married Diane." "That's not fair, Sophia." "Isn't it? When was the last time you came to anything important for me? When was the last time you remembered something I cared about without being reminded? When was the last time you chose me over them?" "Just once." He couldn't answer, his mouth opening and closing without sound. "I don't need your money," I said finally. "Mom and I have figured it out. I'm going to state and I'll graduate without owing you anything." "Sophia, don't be like this. I'm still your father." "Are you?" "Because fathers are supposed to show up. They're supposed to care. They're supposed to love their children enough to make them a priority." "I do love you," he protested, looking genuinely hurt. "Maybe you do in your way. But it's not enough, Dad. It's not the kind of love I need." I stood up, suddenly feeling lighter than I had in years. "I'm done waiting for you to choose me. From now on, I choose myself." After that conversation, I embraced my independence with a determination that surprised even me. I doubled down on my studies, taking extra advanced courses to strengthen my college applications. I increased my hours at the bookstore and started tutoring younger students for additional income. Every dollar went into my college fund. My mother, seeing my resolve, matched my efforts. She took on additional projects at her graphic design firm and cut expenses where she could. Together, we created a financial plan that would make State University possible without my father's help. "I'm so proud of you, Sophia," she told me one evening as we reviewed scholarship applications. "But I want you to know that you don't have to be this strong all the time. It's okay to be hurt by what's happened." I looked up from my laptop. "I know, but being hurt doesn't help me move forward. This does." She smiled sadly. "Just don't build walls so high that no one can reach you." Her words stayed with me, a caution against letting my father's neglect harden me completely. I wasn't closing myself off. I was opening myself to new possibilities, new connections that weren't weighted with disappointment. At school, I found a mentor in Ms. Winters, my art teacher. She recognized something in my increasingly expressive paintings, something raw and honest that caught her attention. "Your work has changed, Sophia," she observed one afternoon as I stayed late to finish a project. "There's more emotion in it now, more authenticity." I nodded, not sure how to explain that I was pouring my pain and determination onto the canvas. "Whatever you're processing, keep channeling it into your art," she advised. "And remember, I'm here if you need to talk." Ms. Winters became my advocate, encouraging me to apply for art scholarships and helping me build a portfolio. Through her, I connected with a summer arts program that further developed my skills and introduced me to other young artists dealing with their own challenges. My relationship with my father entered a strange new phase. I saw him at scheduled visitations, but the pretense of closeness had evaporated. Our conversations were polite but distant. I no longer expected anything from him, which paradoxically seemed to make him more aware of my presence. "Your room is looking nice," he commented during one of my weekends at his house, hovering awkwardly in my doorway as I organized my school materials. "Thanks," I replied without elaboration. "I noticed you've been painting more," he continued. "Your mom mentioned you're in some special art program." "Yeah, on Saturdays." He nodded clearly, searching for something more to say. "That's good. You always had talent." This new dynamic, an earnest but ineffectual father, trying to connect with a daughter who had stopped reaching back, left him visibly uncomfortable. For the first time, he was the one making efforts that went unrewarded. During my senior year, my college plans solidified. I was accepted to State University with a partial academic scholarship, and a smaller arts scholarship came through as well. Between these, my savings, my mother's contribution, and carefully planned loans, my education was secured without a penny from my father. When I showed my acceptance letter to my mother, she hugged me fiercely. "You did this, Sophia. You made this happen." At my father's house, I shared the news more casually. "I got into state. I'm starting in August." "That's wonderful," Diane exclaimed, seeming genuinely pleased. My father nodded, a complex expression on his face. "Congratulations, Soph. I always knew you could do it." I just smiled slightly, not acknowledging his attempt to claim some part in my achievement. Later that evening, he knocked on my door, an envelope in his hand. "I wanted to give you this," he said, extending it toward me. Inside was a check for $5,000. "For college," he explained. "It's not much, but it might help with books or a laptop." I looked at the check, then back at him. "Why now?" He shifted uncomfortably. "I've been thinking about what you said. About choices. You were right, Sophia. I haven't been the father you deserved." For a moment, hope flickered inside me. But then I remembered all the broken promises, all the times he had prioritized his stepdaughters over me, all the years of neglect. "Thank you," I said, carefully placing the check on my desk. "But I've already figured out my finances." "It could still help," he insisted. "It could," I agreed. "But I need to do this on my own." The hurt in his eyes was genuine, but so was my need for independence. This wasn't about punishment, it was about protection. I couldn't allow myself to depend on him again, only to be disappointed when something more important came along. The check remained on my desk uncashed for the rest of my stay. When I left, I slipped it back into his home office. It was a gesture that spoke volumes, a rejection of the too little, too late attempt to buy his way back into my life. My high school graduation was a subdued affair. My father and Diane attended, sitting awkwardly beside my mother and her new boyfriend Robert. They all applauded when I received my diploma, and we took the obligatory photos afterward. "We're so proud of you," my father said, his arm hovering near but not quite touching my shoulders. I smiled politely. "Thanks for coming." That summer, I worked full-time at the bookstore preparing for my transition to college. I spent weekdays with my mother and occasional weekends with my father, though those visits grew shorter and less frequent as August approached. During my last weekend at his house before leaving for university, Jessica came home for a visit. She was entering her junior year at Northwestern, and Amanda had just completed her freshman orientation at Michigan State. Over dinner, Jessica talked about her internship at a marketing firm, while my father listened with rapt attention, asking detailed questions. When there was finally a lull in the conversation, he turned to me. "What about you, Sophia? Are you excited about starting at State?" Before I could answer, Jessica interjected. "Oh my God, Dad, I forgot to tell you about the project lead who wants me to apply for a job after graduation." And just like that, his attention swiveled back to her. Some things never changed. But as I sat there watching the familiar scenario unfold, I realized something important. It no longer hurt the way it once had. I had stopped needing his attention, his approval, his love. I had learned to fill those spaces with my own strength and the genuine connections I had built elsewhere. I was no longer waiting to be chosen. I had already chosen myself. State University opened a world of possibilities I had never imagined. The sprawling campus, diverse student body, and rich academic environment felt like taking a deep breath after years of living in a confined space. For the first time, I was completely free to define myself without the shadow of family dynamics hanging over me. I moved into a modest dorm room shared with a girl named Lily from California. She was studying biology and had a contagious laugh that filled our tiny space. When she asked about my family, I gave her the simplified version. My parents are divorced. I'm closer to my mom. She nodded, accepting this without probing. Mine are still together, but they drive me crazy. 3 younger brothers, too. This is the first time I've had any peace and quiet. We bonded over late-night study sessions and the shared experience of finding our footing in this new environment. Lily became my first true friend at college, introducing me to her study group, which expanded my social circle even further. Communication with my father became increasingly sporadic. He called during my first week asking predictable questions about my classes and dorm. I answered politely but briefly, not elaborating or sharing any meaningful details about my new life. After that, we settled into a pattern of occasional texts and monthly phone calls that rarely lasted more than 10 minutes. During semester breaks, I spent most of my time at my mother's house, making only short obligatory visits to my father. These visits followed a predictable script. My father would make awkward attempts at conversation, while Diane would fill silences with updates about Amanda and Jessica. I would listen politely, share minimal information about my own life, and count the hours until I could leave. During my sophomore year, I declared psychology as my major, with a minor in studio art. The combination allowed me to explore both my analytical and creative interests, particularly in how art therapy could help children process difficult emotions. Dr. Lawson. My developmental psychology professor became an important mentor. She recognized my passion for understanding family dynamics and often stayed after class to discuss research in the field. Your insights about children of divorce are particularly nuanced, Sophia, she remarked after I presented a case study analysis. Have you considered focusing your research in that area? I hesitated, then nodded. It's something I understand from experience. She smiled kindly. The best researchers often are those who bring personal perspective to their work while maintaining scientific objectivity. You seem to have that balance. Under her guidance, I began assisting with a research project examining resilience in children following family restructuring. The work was both academically rewarding and personally healing, allowing me to contextualize my own experience within broader patterns. In the spring semester of my junior year, I met Jake in an abnormal psychology class. He was tall, with kind eyes, and a quiet confidence that drew me immediately. When he asked me to coffee after a particularly intense lecture, I surprised myself by saying yes. Our first date stretched from coffee into dinner as we discovered shared interests in psychology, hiking, and obscure indie films. Unlike previous potential relationships I had sabotaged with emotional walls, I found myself opening up to Jake, sharing more about myself than I had with anyone since childhood. My family situation is complicated. I warned him after several weeks of dating. He took my hand. Most families are, mine included. But when he invited me to his family's Sunday dinner, I witnessed a dynamic so different from what I had known that it left me disoriented. Jake's parents clearly adored each other after 25 years of marriage. His father, Robert, listened attentively when Jake's younger sister spoke about her dance recital, asking thoughtful questions and promising to attend her next performance. "Your family is nice," I said on the drive back to campus, staring out the window to hide unexpected tears. Jake reached over to squeeze my hand. "They can be overwhelming sometimes, but yeah, they're pretty great. They really liked you, by the way." As our relationship deepened, Jake's family embraced me with a warmth I had almost forgotten could exist. His mother called with recipe suggestions when I mentioned cooking. His father sent articles related to my research interests. They remembered my birthday with a thoughtfully chosen gift and a card signed by everyone. Witnessing Jake's relationship with his father was particularly illuminating. They disagreed sometimes, occasionally strongly, but the underlying current of respect and love never wavered. Robert showed up constantly, in small and large ways. A quick text to check in attendance at Jake's intramural games phone calls, just to chat about a book they'd both read. "Is this normal?" I asked Jake one evening after watching him and his father collaborate on fixing my car's persistent rattle. "Is what normal this? Your dad driving 2 hours just because you mentioned my car was making a weird noise?" Jake looked confused. Yeah, that's just Dad. He likes fixing things. I nodded, not explaining that my own father wouldn't drive across town for me, let alone 2 hours each way. The contrast was so stark it sometimes left me breathless. My limited contact with my father continued through these years. Holiday gatherings remained awkward with conversation revolving primarily around my stepsister's achievements. Jessica had graduated from Northwestern and landed a prestigious job at a marketing firm in Chicago. Amanda was thriving at Michigan State, recently engaged to her college boyfriend. My father's attempts to connect with me evolved from awkward conversations to material gestures. For my 21st birthday, he sent an expensive watch I never wore. For Christmas, designer handbags I left in their boxes. Each gift felt like a transaction, a way to absolve himself of guilt without the harder work of genuine connection. During my senior year as graduation approached, these dynamics came to a head. My mother had been helping me plan for the ceremony, arranging for our extended family to attend, and organizing a small celebration afterward. Have you spoken to your father about graduation? She asked carefully. I sent him the date, I replied, focusing on the invitation list we were compiling. I'm sure he'll come. Sophia, she said gently. I know things are still difficult between you two, but this is a big milestone. Maybe it's time to what, Mom, pretend everything's fine, that he didn't abandon me emotionally for years. She sighed. No, never that. But maybe it's time to decide what kind of relationship you want with him moving forward. On your terms. Her words stayed with me, prompting a rare moment of introspection about my father. The truth was, I had stopped actively resenting him years ago. The pain had dulled to a distant ache, an occasionally reopened wound. What remained was a practiced indifference, the protective barrier I had built against further disappointment. My graduation day arrived bright and clear. As I donned my cap and gown, I felt a profound sense of accomplishment. This journey had been mine, shaped by my choices, my determination, my resilience. From the stage, I spotted my mother's beaming face in the crowd. Beside her sat Robert, her boyfriend of 3 years, who had become a supportive presence in my life. And there, a few rows back, were my father and Diane. After the ceremony, amidst hugs and congratulations, my father approached holding a small wrapped box. I'm so proud of you, Sophia, he said, his voice thick with emotion. You've accomplished so much. I accepted his hug with the same polite distance I had maintained for years. Thank you for coming. He extended the gift. This is for you. Open it later when you have time. At the small restaurant where we gathered afterward, I observed my father's awkward attempts to integrate with the celebration. He spoke cordially with my mother, and Robert complimented my accomplishments to my professors who attended and seemed genuinely interested in my future plans. Dr. Lawson mentioned you've been accepted to the master's program, he said during a quiet moment. That's wonderful. I nodded. I'll be specializing in child psychology, focusing on children navigating family transitions. Something flickered in his eyes, recognition perhaps. You'll be excellent at that, he said softly. You understand it in a way most people can't. Later that evening, alone in my apartment, I opened his gift. Inside the small box was a simple silver pendant in the shape of a compass. The card read, "To help you find your way, though you've always been better at that than I was. Love, Dad." I held the necklace, feeling its weight in my palm. It was the first gift from him in years that felt personal, thoughtful. Not an expensive attempt to buy affection, but a recognition of who I had become despite his failures. I didn't wear it immediately, but I didn't return it either. I placed it in my jewelry box, a complicated symbol of a complicated relationship, one I was still learning to navigate on my own terms. At 28, I look back on that journey from abandoned daughter to self-sufficient woman with a complex mixture of emotions. The girl who once waited desperately for her father's attention has become a woman who understands the profound difference between being chosen and choosing herself. My professional life flourished in ways I could never have predicted. After completing my master's degree, I worked at a family counseling center before opening my own practice, specializing in helping children navigate family transitions, divorce, remarriage, step-siblings. My personal experience, transformed through education and training, became my greatest professional asset. You have a gift for this work, my supervisor had told me during my clinical internship. The children trust you. They sense that you understand. I did understand. I recognized their confusion, their hurt, their sense of displacement, and I could offer them something I had lacked guidance through the emotional minefield of family restructuring. My personal healing continued alongside my professional growth. Therapy helped me process lingering resentment and grief. Art remained a vital outlet, my paintings evolving from expressions of pain to explorations of resilience and hope. Jake remained a steadfast presence through these years. Our relationship deepened into a partnership based on mutual respect and understanding. When he proposed during a sunset hike in the mountains, I said yes without hesitation, no longer afraid that love would inevitably lead to abandonment. "You know my family is already planning the wedding," he joked as he slipped the ring onto my finger. "They've been planning it since our third date." I laughed, leaning into his embrace. His family had indeed embraced me as one of their own. Sunday dinners, holiday celebrations, impromptu gatherings all included me without question. Robert Jake's father had become a model of what fatherhood could be: attentive, supportive, consistently present. My mother flourished in her own life, her relationship with Robert providing companionship and joy. She remained my strongest supporter, celebrating my accomplishments and offering wisdom during challenges. My relationship with my father entered yet another phase when he experienced a health crisis 3 years ago. A heart attack at 56 forced him to confront his mortality and perhaps his regrets. During his recovery, he called me directly, not texting, not communicating through Diane or my stepsisters. "Sophia," he said, his voice weaker than I remembered, "I know we don't talk much, but I'd like to see you if you're willing." I agreed to visit him at the hospital, unsure what to expect. The man in the hospital bed looked diminished, vulnerable, in a way I had never seen before. Diane had stepped out to get coffee, leaving us alone for the first time in years. "Thank you for coming," he said, gesturing to the chair beside his bed. I sat noticing the gray that now dominated his hair, the new lines around his eyes. "How are you feeling?" "Better now." It was a close call. An awkward silence fell. I waited, having learned long ago that it wasn't my responsibility to fill these gaps. "Facing death makes you think," he finally continued, "about your life, your choices, your regrets." I remained silent, sensing there was more. "Sophia, I failed you." His voice cracked slightly. "I can see that now with painful clarity. I got so caught up in proving myself to Diane, to her daughters, that I neglected the one person who should have been my priority all along." I had imagined this conversation so many times over the years, the acknowledgement, the apology. But now that it was happening, I felt strangely calm. "Yes, you did," I said simply. He nodded, accepting this without defense. "I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that I understand what I did. And I'm sorry, truly sorry." "Why tell me now?" I asked. He looked at his hands, medical tubes trailing from one wrist. "Because I might not get another chance, and because you deserve to hear it, whether it changes anything or not." We talked for nearly an hour, after that the longest real conversation we'd had in over a decade. He asked questions about my life, my practice, my relationship with Jake. For once, he truly listened to the answers. When Diane returned, something had shifted between us. Not a miraculous healing of all wounds, but a tentative step toward something new, a relationship defined by honesty, rather than obligation or avoidance. In the years since we have built a cautious connection, coffee every few months, occasional phone calls that move beyond surface pleasantries. He attended my wedding to Jake last year, giving a brief but heartfelt toast that acknowledged his failures without dwelling on them. "Sophia has always had the strength to forge her own path," he said, raising his glass. "I wish I could take credit for that strength, but the truth is, she developed it despite me, not because of me. Jake, you're a fortunate man to have earned the love of someone so resilient, so genuine, so capable of choosing wisely." My relationships with my stepsisters evolved as well. As adults freed from the competitive dynamic our parents had created, we found tentative common ground. Jessica, now a successful marketing executive with children of her own, reached out after her first daughter was born. "I never realized how hard it must have been for you," she admitted over coffee, her newborn sleeping in a carrier beside her. I was too wrapped up in my own teenage drama to see what was happening. I'm sorry, Sophia. Amanda, teaching high school English in Michigan, connected with me during a professional conference in Chicago. Over dinner, she confessed her own complicated feelings about our blended family. I was so jealous of you, she admitted. You had this whole history with your dad that we didn't have. I think that's why I was always competing for his attention. These conversations helped me understand that my stepsisters had been navigating their own challenges during those difficult years. They weren't villains in my story any more than I was in theirs, just young people trying to find security in a shifting family landscape. The greatest healing, however, came through my work with children facing similar situations. Each time I helped a child articulate their confusion, each time I guided parents to recognize the impact of their choices, I reclaimed a piece of my own narrative, transforming pain into purpose. One particular client, a 12-year-old girl struggling with her father's new family, asked me a question that resonated deeply. Does it ever stop hurting? I considered my answer carefully. The hurt changes, I told her. It becomes less about what you lost and more about what you've built instead. You learn that you are whole on your own, not defined by anyone else's choices. That's the wisdom I've gathered from this journey. True healing isn't about forgetting the past or pretending the hurt never happened. It's about reclaiming your story, your worth, your future. It's about recognizing that waiting to be chosen places your value in someone else's hands, while choosing yourself places it firmly in your own. If you've ever felt forgotten, overlooked, or abandoned by someone who should have loved you, better know this. You don't have to wait forever at a door that keeps closing. You can build your own doorway to a life filled with people who see your worth, who choose you freely and consistently. The people who are meant to love you shouldn't make you wait in line. Have you ever had to stop waiting for someone's approval or love? Share your story in the comments below. Your experience might help someone else find the courage to choose themselves too. Remember to like, subscribe, and share if this resonated with you. Thank you for listening to my journey. And remember, your worth is never determined by someone else's ability to recognize it.